What's up, guys and gals? This is Chris from Legendary Mana, and it's time for another episode of Brewers Corner. And I'm super excited that I'm just going to skip all over the announcements, but if you want to talk to us, leave a comment below in, the boxes down there. You just type and say, you know what you're supposed to be doing. Anyways, let's get into the deck because I'm super excited to bring you blue-white spirits because this deck is fun and enjoyable and very competitive, well, in my opinion, in the current meta. And we'll be streaming this live 2 nights this week. Since we have pre-release on Friday, we will not be streaming on Friday this time. Normally it would be Wednesday and Friday. So I think this time what we'll do is we'll stream tomorrow evening and Wednesday evening. Or Thursday evening. You know what? I'm gonna do Tuesday and Thursday, and we'll stream this deck and have some fun with it. Because boy, this deck is just a pleasure to play with. So let's get into it and let's tell you all about the deck. Blue-white spirits. This means we have a lot of flying creatures. We have some counter magic, and we just have some shenanigans going on all over the place. So, first creature, which will show you... Wait, I can't... Yeah, it's right here. Whatever. Anyhow, Mausoleum Wanderer. We're running 4 copies of Mausoleum Wanderer. It's a 1/1 for 1 blue, flying. Whenever another spirit enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+1 until the end of turn. You can also sacrifice it to counter target instant or sorcery spell, and they have to pay X, meaning your opponent, to ignore this effect. Meaning, let's just say turn 2 or turn 1 they play Thoughtseize. You can sacrifice Mausoleum Wanderer. They have to pay 1 because it's a 1/1 in order to ignore that counter effect. Later on, for instance, if you play another spirit or and it gets a +1/+1 until the end of turn, then it becomes that they have to do 2 in order to ignore the effect. So it's a pretty great card to have, not only early game, but also late game as well, depending on your opponent. Next, we are running 4 copies of Rattlechains. Rattlechains will get you that instant speed +1/+1 bump on Mausoleum Wanderer because it has flash. It's a 1 blue and 1 for a 2/1 flying spirit with flash. When Rattlechains enters the battlefield, target spirit gets hexproof until the end of turn. Also, as long as Rattlechains is on the battlefield, you may cast spirit spells as though they had flash. So then all your spirits get flash, which is great. I mean, you're basically enabling your deck to play your creatures on your opponent's turn, which is, you can't beat that. Next, we're running 4 copies of Selfless Spirit. 1 white and 1 for a 2/1 flying spirit. Gets you that bump with Mausoleum Wanderer, as well as when you sacrifice Selfless Spirit, it gives all of your creatures hexproof. Or sorry, not hexproof. Why did I say hexproof? Indestructible until the end of turn. I mean, you see it right there on the card. Anyways. Yes, so you sacrifice Selfless Spirit, creatures gain indestructible until the end of turn. So pretty much helps you against board sweepers and cards that basically destroy cards that you're have on the battlefield. Sure. But at the same time, the one thing to note, it doesn't help you against things like target player sacrifices, so Leyline of the Veil. It just doesn't really matter. Next, we are running 3 3-drop creatures. The first one is Spell Queller. It's 1 blue and white and 1 for a 2/3 flying spirit with flash. So again, this can be played anytime. If most of you have seen this before, like say in standard, and it's also in modern right now, which is in the Jeskai Tempo deck, and I think there's a couple other decks that it makes an appearance, and I think it's used in some sideboards, but primarily it's in Jeskai Tempo. When Spell Queller enters the battlefield, you may exile target spell with a converted mana cost 4 or less, which hits just about any spell in modern. Most spells, not all, but hits a lot. So it's a really good card to have in your arsenal when you're playing in modern. The only drawback is when Spell Queller leaves the battlefield, the opponent may cast that card that you exiled without paying its mana cost. However, you have ways to protect your Spell Quellers when you have exiled those creatures. The other thing, fun tip about Spell Queller. Let's just say you play Spell Queller and you have a spell that is critical to the opponent to win. And you need a way out, and they cast, let's just say, a Death Shadow, and they have a kill spell, or I don't know. Let's just say they have a way to deal with Spell Queller, and you don't have a way to counter it. One thing you can do to sort of get yourself on the upside on this is when you play Spell Queller, the trigger goes on the stack. So for instance, Spell Queller enters the battlefield, so it has already hit the battlefield, and the exile trigger is on the stack. So you can then exile Spell Queller before the exile trigger completes, and that card that you are sort of exiling of your opponents will actually just disappear and go in limbo. It will no longer be able to be used or cast. So just something to think about when you're working with Spell Queller. It's look it up. It's a legit sort of loophole in the way that the card is, sort of the rules are stacked with it. Anyways, that was just a tip. Next, let's go to the next almost most important, actually no, it is the most important spirit in the deck. That's Drogskol Captain. 1 blue, 1 white, and 1 for 2/2 Spirit Soldier with flying. As long as it's on the battlefield, other spirit creatures you control get +1/+1, as well as hexproof. Now, it doesn't give itself hexproof, but that's what you have things like Rattlechains and Selfless Spirit to help protect that long enough until you can have 2 Drogskol Captains on the battlefield. 2 of them on the battlefield means they both get hexproof, which is all your creatures have hexproof, which is pretty great. Next, the second runner-up shining star of the deck, which you've seen in a lot of builds for Jeskai Tempo right now in Modern, and that's Geist of St. Traft. We use 3 copies of Geist of St. Traft. It could be 4, but I opted to have a few more spells in the deck to sort of speed up the process of the deck. So we're only running 3 copies. But you can certainly run 4 and bump out another spell if you want to. So, all in all, 23 creatures. Geist of the St. Traft. Oh, I guess I didn't explain that card. Should I do that? Yeah, I guess I should. Geist of the St. Traft is 1 blue, 1 white, and 1 for 2/2 Spirit with hexproof. Now, this one does not have flying. Much like the other ones do, this one does not. However, it has hexproof, and whenever Geist of St. Traft attacks, create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying that is tapped and attacking, and then you exile it at the end of combat. So basically, Geist of St. Traft gives you swinging for 6 instead of 2, which is pretty sweet. And it's hexproof. The only challenge is without it being flying, it can be chump blocked pretty easily. So just keep that in mind. But there's ways around that. There's ways to sort of prevent that from happening. You know, hold up for a spell to remove one of their creatures. We'll get there, as well as we have some enchantments we can do. So, speaking of enchantments, let's go ahead and talk about the enchantments. And there's only one. We're running 3 copies of probably one of my favorite underused, underutilized, and underrated enchantment out there, and that's Steel of the Godhead. Steel of the Godhead, enchant creature. As long as enchanted creature is white, it gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. And as long as enchanted creature is blue, it gets +1/+1 and can't be blocked. So you slap this on Geist of St. Traft, he becomes a 4/4 unblockable with lifelink because it's both blue and white. And the best thing is since you have a majority of your creatures that are blue and white, well, actually all of them, but then Spell Queller, Geist of St. Traft, and Drogskol Captain, they're all multicolored. They're both blue and white, so they get both bumps when you play Steel the Godhead on that creature. It runs 3. Now, like I was saying earlier, you could bump out one of Steel the Godheads and run with 2 and go to 4 Geist of the St. Traft. However, I prefer having 3 and having 3 and 3. So 3 Geist and 3 Steel the Godhead. That way, Steel the Godhead comes up a little bit more consistently. But again, that's just a personal preference. Let's move on to the sorceries. We don't have many. We just have one, and that's Serum Visions. We run 2 copies of Serum Visions. The primary goal of this deck is to play mostly on your opponent's turns, but you can't go wrong having a Serum Visions, because having the ability to filter out and get the cards that you want is invaluable, especially in Modern. Next, to instants, we're running 3 ops. So it's the instant version of Serum Visions, just 1 less scry. So you could Serum Visions opt, which is great. Kind of just, set your draws up better, so then that way you get the cards that you want. Next, we're running 3 copies of Path Exile to deal with any of those pesky creatures that may block Geist of the St. Traft. So can't complain about that card. Next, we're running 3 Remands, and you're wondering, well, why are we running Remand versus any other counter magic? And really, Remand is good because it hits both instants, sorceries, creatures, anything, right? It puts it back into their hand. That's fine, but it also draws you a card. So again, it kind of just gives you that card draw that you want in this deck in order to get to your threats faster. You want to get to your threats as fast as possible. Next, we have 2 4-mana spells, and that's 2 copies of Cryptic Command, which I don't think I really have to explain this card, but basically you can counter a spell, you can return a target permanent to the opponent's hand, you can tap all the creatures your opponent controls, and you can draw a card. You choose 2 of those modes when you cast this card. So it's just a great all-around card to have. Only 2 because the amount of blue sources that we have, it's a 3 blue spell. It just needs any more than you could be holding them in your hand. So 2 is for speed, and then with having more opt and Remand and Serum Visions to get there. So it's pretty much the right number in my opinion. And finally, the last spell in the main board, we have 1 copy of Ojutai's Command. I really like this card. It's not. I think it's fairly underutilized, but I think in this particular instance, it actually works really well because the first mode, return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. So think about it this way: it could be a Mausoleum Wanderer that's in your graveyard, or a Rattlechains to set up flashing in Selfless Spirit or Drogskol Captain, or it's, you know, it allows you to bring back a Selfless Spirit to make your creatures indestructible. I mean, there's many ways that you can use Ojutai's Command to your benefit, right? So you have your targets are Selfless Spirit, Rattlechains, and Mausoleum Wanderer. It has a lot of versatility there, and it just allows you to, you know, say, oh, okay, it can really get you out of certain jams. It's only 1 copy. You could make an argument of having 2. I thought about it, and I still might after our live stream playthrough. Right now, though, I'm staying with 3 Steel Godhead and 1 Ojutai's Command. But you could make an argument of going down to 2 Steel the Godheads with 2 Ojutai's Command. I mean, it's totally feasible. Now, let's go ahead and let's talk about the land. There's only 20 lands. It doesn't really need any more than that because you can filter through. The key is having the best case scenario on the draw or play. You know, from your starting 7 or 6 or whatever is your starting hand. So we have 3 Cavern of Souls. It's pretty self-explanatory, just allows you to have your creatures come out and not be countered. We have 2 Celestial Colonnade, just kind of give you that push over the edge if you need it late game. 3 Flooded Strand, just to fetch a forest or an island or a plains. There's no forest in this deck. Trust me, no forest in this deck. 3 Glacial Fortress. Glacial Fortress enters the battlefield tapped unless you control plains or an island. So it's just good in this. It'll be a Hallowed Fountain for you late game, right? Without the drawback of paying 2 life. Next, we have, speaking of Hallowed Fountain, we have 2 Hallowed Fountain, 4 island, 2 plains, and the final land is a Moorland Hunt. Basically, Moorland Hunt is tap it for 1 colorless. Also, you can pump 1 blue and 1 white into it, tap it, exile creature card from your graveyard to create a 1/1 spirit token. This could be one of those where it's designed to have that recursion ability if you need it, and just kind of gives you those extra creatures on the board if you need blockers or what have you. So there's certainly a lot of uses for Moorland Hunt. Next, we're going to move on to the sideboard, and it's a pretty simplistic sideboard at the moment. Has some specific targets for itself. We're running 2 Celestial Purge for black or red decks. It's good against like Death Shadow. It's good against Jund. It's good against Abzan. You know, just with those nasty black permanents like say Leyline of the Veil. Yeah, they're not very nice. So it just helps get rid of those. Running 2 Kentucky Warwage for the Affinity Matchups. Leyline of Sanctity, 3 copies of those. We'll save for Storm or any of those wild matchups that you are continuously targeted. Mill is one of those other ones, although Mill's not very popular right now. 2 Mana Leaks to bring in some extra counter magic if you need it. Depending on what kind of matchup you have. So you could play Mana Leak against, you know, I would probably play against Tron, some other deck types too. 2 Rest in Peace for Delver, Let's see what else. There's a couple other rest in peace. Stony Silence for the Affinity matchup and Lantern Control, and 2 copies of Windborn Muse. Something that not a lot of people have heard of, but it's a 4-drop spirit flying. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature he or she controls that's attacking you. So basically, it's a creature version of Ghostly Prison. So this is one of those, if you're playing against tokens or you know, I know there's quite a few humans. This is just one of those that it kind of helps you out. And same thing with like Bulgles, like early game or mid game Bulgles. This will help you out. So that's the deck. I hope you'll join us tomorrow on the stream, and we can talk about the deck. We can play. We're gonna play the league and just have some fun with it. I think this is gonna be a really fun deck to play. So until tomorrow on the stream, I bid you farewell.